Hi, Shaheen.
Hi.
Hi. Good to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you. Shall we start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and namaste to everyone who has joined us this afternoon for this interesting webinar, It All Adds Up. Thank you for joining via Zoom, if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook as well. My name is Pushpa Tantri. I head the maths team at Akshara Foundation. This is our annual symposium, It All Adds Up. Due to the pandemic, we are hosting this online for a second year in a row. Before we begin this session, we will watch a short video, a film that will set the context for today's discussion. This film was made by SAP Labs as a pro bono effort after having studied Akshara's initiatives during the pandemic. Over to you, Sushmita, for the video. Yeah, thank you for that short film, and thanks to SAP Labs for doing this for us. So EdTech industry is growing in India and has raised more than 5.5 billion USD in funding so far. On the other hand, education crisis has affected close to 270 million children in India due to school closures for past 2 years. Are we okay with this? Are we okay to deny the fundamental right to education to our children? Is there anything possible to facilitate learning for our children, especially the last child in a remote village in India? What is the art of the possible? Today, let's discuss deliberate debate on the art of the possible, on the role of civil society, on the role of the government and all stakeholders to provide education to our children during these trying times. Has past 2 years given us enough time to try out different models or interventions in the field? Have we learned anything from these experiments and different pilots? Can these be built and delivered to scale? We will unfold this topic as we go forward in this webinar, getting different views from multiple stakeholders. We have an interesting line of speakers today from across the government, key influencers of civil society. We have a large number of audience from across the spectrum, from teachers, people from the state education departments, people from different partner NGOs, and our own people in the field. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this webinar. Without further delay, let me introduce our keynote speaker for today, Shaheen Mistri. Shaheen Mistri is the founder and CEO of Teach for India. Shaheen was born in Mumbai, grew up in 5 countries around the world, and at the age of 18, returned to Mumbai to do something about the unequal opportunities that children have in India. Shaheen founded the first Akshara Center in 1989 with just about 15 children. Today, Akshara Foundation impacts more than 10,000 children across Mumbai and Pune. In 2008, searching for a new way to impact more children and inspired by Teach for America's model, Shaheen founded Teach for India with an audacious vision of providing an excellent education to all children across India by building a movement of leaders committed to ending educational inequity in India. Today, Teach for India impacts 32,000 children through the direct work across 8 cities in India and has produced more than 9,000 student alumni. I'm also one of the proud TFI alumni. Shaheen is an advocate for student voice and partnership and has created several high-impact initiatives in this area. She has started I.A.S, which is an incubator for passionate education entrepreneurs who are willing to adopt Teach for India's model to their context and region in rural areas. She serves on the board of Akshara Foundation and is the advisory of Board of Museum of Schools. She is an Ashoka Fellow, a Global Leader for Tomorrow at the World Economic Forum, and an Asia Society 21 Leader. She has received several accolades and awards, including Jamnalal Bajaj Award and ETP Prime Women Leadership Award in 2020. Shaheen's work for children over the past 3 decades has mobilized thousands of people to work together for systemic change in education. She has built the largest network of education changemakers in the country. It's our pleasure, Shaheen, to have you in this panel today and as our keynote speaker in today's webinar. Before I hand over to Shaheen, a few housekeeping rules today. Please type in your answers in the chat box or the Q&A box. We will address this after each session or at the end of the session. You can watch us live on YouTube channel and also on Facebook and post your comments there also. Over to you, Shaheen.
Thank you so much, Pushpa. It's absolutely lovely to be here. And good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody is keeping safe and well. Big thank you for these precious few minutes with all of you. And I've chosen to call this really the truth and hope of blended learning. So let's jump right in. I want you to meet a dear friend of mine. His name is Mike. And he was a teacher for 2 years in the US in Teach for India's sister program, Teach for America. He taught low-income kids. He saw many of the statistics play out that you just saw in the video. And then he became a very young school principal. And he reached his school starry-eyed, very excited. And he found out that in his school, year on year, 50% of kids would drop out. 50% of kids didn't graduate from that school. And so one of the first things he did was he called all the students in the school together and he said, turn to your left. And then he said, turn to your right. And he said, one of those people you just looked at, the statistics say will not graduate from this school. And he said, but I'm going to tell you something. In my school and in my class, every single one of you will not only graduate, but get admission into a four-year college with a scholarship to back it. Fast forward many, many actions later, he talks about the time when college admission letters are coming in. And he said every time a child would get admission into a college and a scholarship, they would gather all the children in the gym and they would have a very rickety ladder on one side of the hall and all the children on the other side. And the child who had got admission into college chose their favorite music and they ran down the hall and then they climbed up the rickety ladder, which was held by all the people that had helped that child climb. And they got to the top and they signed their name and they said, okay, 88 more children to go. And he talks about how that happened again and again until the last child to get admission, a child called Travis, ran down the hall, climbed up the rickety ladder and signed his name. Every single child graduated that year. Mike says this. He says, truth without hope is failure, but hope without truth is fantasy. He says it is only through both of those that you see what is possible. And so today I ask that all of us hold the mirror up, not just to the truth of the country, of the pandemic, of the education system, but the truth of ourselves. And let's look at what that is actually saying. And some of this you just saw so beautifully captured in that video. Learning loss, it is estimated that a grade 3 student may only catch up by 2030. That life earnings are going to be deeply impacted, potentially amounting to a loss of 5.7% of the total GDP of South Asia. That dropout rates, and these are very conservative numbers, qualitative numbers on the ground that we're hearing, especially in budget private schools, is that that number could be closer to 40–50% of kids dropping out of the system. A rise in poverty caused by the pandemic, so that children in poverty now have even more to struggle with. And finally, if you look at investment over the last year, only 2% of money plowed into COVID relief actually went to education. The truth is hard for all of us. And yet the other side of truth is the hope. I love this. Another dear friend of mine, Ratish, this post came in the middle of the pandemic, and it says, how are you? I've been answering this question in countless meetings. People say new normal, fantastic. But I took a minute today when someone asked, how are you, to actually reflect on how I'm feeling. The truth is, I feel great. Sure, life is hard, time is tight, he goes on to say, but as entrepreneurs who have committed ourselves to social impact, my favorite line of the post, this is showtime. This is when all of us show up with our best game to find innovative solutions, forge partnerships, sustain our businesses, keep up our team morale while taking care of ourselves. The hope is, what if we were to think of this as showtime? And so what has the pandemic actually taught us about blended learning? A couple of thoughts here, two major shifts. The first is what I call the learning from life shift. We used to think learning happened in a classroom. We now know that learning can happen from life. Imagine this. Your class starts early in the morning when you're still at home with a prompt from your teacher on fitness. You then learn from actually helping your mom or dad cook food for the family. You go on to be given a question of the day to reflect on at home, and then you join a sync space with your classmates to actually learn and discuss the content you read independently. You then have time for art and actually go outside your class this time, find something you love and paint it. You then have phone a friend time where you're checking in with someone on how they're doing. You then have basketball. Evening, you have a book and you're independently reading. At night, you actually meditate before you give gratitude when you sleep. Your whole life becomes a platform for learning. One big lesson from the pandemic. The second shift I call the Ubuntu shift. We thought we needed to learn from one teacher. And so if we were lucky, we had a good teacher. If we were unlucky, not such a good teacher. If we were very unlucky, maybe we didn't even have a teacher. Two, we can learn from anyone, anything, at any time. Very powerful learning that the pandemic gave us. And so here you see a few examples. This is a particular student who, in addition to their own class teacher, is actually part of an art program, is now communicating and learning from people in other countries, attends a singer, rapper turned social workers talk, has an online PTM that they're encouraging their parents to go to, attends master classes. Suddenly, the world is open to every single child, irrespective of background. And the schedule now starts looking very, very different. On the left, you see a very typical old schedule, subjects broken up with a lunch break. On the right, you see not such a typical schedule. Some of the stuff is done async with a pre-recorded video. So if I don't understand, I can rewatch it 5 times. Sometimes I'm learning from one teacher, sometimes from another teacher. Sometimes I'm now learning from a peer. I have virtual groups with my friends. I use WhatsApp effectively. I actually learn from my family in ways that I didn't know was possible before. So the whole opportunity for the schedule to be turned around in blended learning is a beautiful part of the hope. What will this take? And I think often, if I were on the side of government, what a daunting, difficult, and yet such an important time in history to make what I'm calling the greatest commitment. The first, and this is something that worries me a little bit as I talk to different people, are we taking the gap seriously enough? This is not about a 15-day bridge program or even a 1-month fix. This is going to take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to get our children fully back on track. And that really starts with us grounding ourselves in the research, reading about not just the immediate impact on children, but the medium and long-term implications, and not only looking at academics, but looking at the wide range of student needs. So first thing is we need to really hold up the mirror, understand the truth, take these gaps seriously. The second is really grounding ourselves in research. The research on bridging learning gaps is fairly consistent around the world. We need to reduce content. We need to figure out ways to do small group remediation, which may mean we need to bring in lots and lots of volunteers. We need to supplement academics with SEL support, right? So we need to have a holistic, planned approach, and we cannot wait until schools reopen to start the preparation. We should have started the preparation 2 years ago when the pandemic hit. And if we haven't already, we need to move really fast to prepare our systems. The third, we talk about digital access, but we know that 60% of children in our country do not have dedicated access. We need to make real investments. The way governments have invested in textbooks in the past needs to be the way that they invest in tabs in the future. It is a daunting task, and it is not as easy as just hand out tabs and learning will happen. But that is an integral part of what the plan will need to entail. Investment in teacher training. One of the things I've observed is teaching online is not the same as teaching in a classroom. It's not about doing what you did in the past and holding a video in front of you. It is a very different type of teaching to really know how to engage, to really know how to check for learning, to really know how to continue to build culture and values and relationships in children in the blended world. And so a big part of our work will need to be an investment in teacher training. The next is to really remember, even though the gap is so big, to keep our bar high. I started by telling you Mike's story because I think what led to that success was his own conviction, his high bar, and his belief that incremental is not enough for our children. Our children are precious and they have unlimited potential, and we must hold the bar high and expect a lot from our system, from our teachers, most importantly from ourselves. We must encourage experiments. We must remove fear from the system, celebrate bright spots. Even if we can't solve the problem in every school tomorrow, how do we find schools that are doing this well and celebrate them? And finally, and perhaps most importantly, we have 270 million children who can help us in this work. I'll say that again because it's a little bit of a radical idea. Our children, our 270 million children, can be our partners in this work. They have the idealism, they have the vision, they have the commitment, they can teach each other, they can enroll kids back in school, they can help kids feel secure, they can be our partners, and they certainly understand technology better than we do. One offer of help for those of you watching who are in government. At Teach for India, we've developed an online teacher training portal. It's completely free of cost, open source. Our aim is to work on professional development and to scale it across the country. We build teacher leaders. We talk on the platform about what a reimagined education can really look like. And we're building more and more tools to help at this point in time with blended learning. So do please contact us if we can be of help at all. And I know we're going to have a chance for questions a little bit later. So I will end my comments there and just say again, as I did in the beginning, stay safe, stay happy through this time. Remember something one of my most dear friends who's an educator told me. She said, we owe it to ourselves to be full of joy, because when we are full of joy, we are able to spread joy and passion to our children. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shaheen, for your powerful speech there. I don't think we have any questions as of now, right now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Truth is hard for all of us, and COVID learning loss is not a quick or a short-term fix. But there is always hope to develop innovative solutions, show partnerships, and learn anywhere, anytime from anyone. It's a relentless work and it should happen. And one thing what Shaheen said was keep the bar high and no fixes, no quick fixes there. We'll move on to our next panel discussion right now. It is on COVID learning gaps and how to address them. This panel will be moderated by Mrs. Vaijayanti. Vaijayanti heads the research group at Akshara Foundation. She holds an MPhil in Applied Economics from Center of Development Studies from JNU. She has worked in health sector and decentralization prior to venturing into education field. In education, she has extensively worked on issues ranging from early childhood to school education in the Indian context. She is a member of several committees set up by the government of Karnataka on elementary education, human development, and ECCE. Vaijayanti has also anchored the preparation of NCF for ECCE Karnataka. Over to you, Vaijayanti, for taking over the panel discussion next. Thanks.
Thank you, Pushpa. Thanks a lot for Shaheen for setting a right context. I must say that. I mean, she spoke about what are the critical issues at this point in time that we all need to think about. Today, for this particular session, COVID learning gap and how to address them, we would like to discuss about what happened to COVID, what happened to learning during COVID times, and what are the learning gaps, and how did the system respond to the whole issue of learning gap, and what have been the learnings, because tomorrow if we want to address them, then what are the learnings from the the whole COVID period of 18 months, that when the schools were shut. To discuss all these issues, we have two eminent panelists. One from the government, because Shaheen also spoke about the role of government, which is very, very critical in Indian context. And we have a representative from civil society organization. So the panelists are expected to, talk about the challenges, the strategies, and the solutions that they, saw at their level. To discuss all these things now, it is my privilege to invite Mr. Nalini Atul, who has been an additional commissioner for public instruction from Kalaburagi division. And as we all know, Kalaburagi division is also part of represent Karnataka and has a couple of aspirational districts as well. So we know that if some of the strategies that administrators carried out during the COVID, if they have worked in the most backward district, then probably we can try out elsewhere as well. And also I'm happy to talk about Nalini, who has been and kind of a open-minded officer for innovations and local solutions and so on and so forth. And he has been the first few to implement effectively Vidyagama, and he has been doing several experiments, and definitely this panel discussion would help us understand some of those things, and we'll get some insights on that. I welcome Nalini Atul, so please join us.
Thank you.
Now I would like to introduce Professor Rishikesh. Rishikesh has been a professor in Azim Premji University, and he has also been a leader in Azim Premji Foundation. And he brings in a different perspective, that is civil society perspective, and he has years of experience in research and teaching. He also has been part of several committees in, on quality education in government of Karnataka. That apart, he has been, a member of task force that is working on NEP 2020 in Karnataka. It is pleasure to have him and get a different perspective on what are the issues during COVID. I welcome you, Rishi. Please join us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, as Shaheen also said that, she kind of shared a lot of interesting statistics which are quite worrisome as well. And we know that as many as around 190 countries had to shut the schools during when the COVID outbreak happened. And then, so all of us were kind of, we had absolutely no experience prior to that, and we all had to think about different ways of handling this. So now this question is to Nalini, which is about as an administrator, what were the initial thoughts, of learning without the classroom? That is the challenge, right? The moment we talk about education, schooling, everything, the first thing that comes to us is a classroom, right? When anybody talks to us about how was your experience in the childhood, the first thing is about your classroom, right? So that way, I mean, how did you guys, deal with engaging the students and engaging the teachers, and also, what has been your experience in this whole process of, COVID learning camps? Nalin?
So thank you for that question, Vajanti ma'am. When the when COVID came in and the schools were closed, our initial response was the same as for anybody. We all, like, for us, we jumped to something called online classes. We started something called a crash course for class 10 students, because we thought that is the most appropriate age group to attempt, and they also needed some help as far as SLC examinations were concerned. So we started a crash course for around about 1.5 lakh children in the division. We were actually experimenting with blended learning. We had feedbacks from around 30,000 odd children, 28,000 odd children gave us a feedback on as to, what are the kind of things that they would like to see in an online class that was happening. But more or less, it was a formal classroom which was directly converted into an online class. Nothing else, more presentations and a few videos and all being utilized in the classroom. So that was the very initial thing, very first thing that came to our mind, and we implemented. But over a period of time, we realized our mistakes, because when we implemented it, we realized that, out of 1.5 lakh children which we wanted to target, we were only able to target, by the end, we only had around about 30,000 students who were there with us. So we were hovering around some 20-25%, not more than that, children being able to utilize the facilities because of so many problems. It was related to availability of laptops, systems, the cost of data, the time for which the machine will be available at home, because at the time at which we are conducting, if the parents are carrying their mobiles and going to field for working, or they're going somewhere for their business or jobs, it is not available for the child to utilize. So there are so many issues which were there. So accordingly, we kept thinking about what are the other solutions that can be there. Parallelly, we actually, there was one thing which happened once we started online classes for children. We realized that teachers needs a lot of training. So we went ahead and we started with something called teachers training. We trained around about 60,000 plus teachers on an average for 6 days, and in subjects in utilization of technology. We also gave them materials and everything, and we took help of APF in that. Parallelly, we also gave, because it was holiday or work from home kind of environment for teachers. So we had 2 sets of work from home activities, which we gradually, changed it. Initially, it was a paper pen based, work. They were supposed to create some Word documents and send it to us. And then the second set of work from home activities that we gave them, we asked them to put it on blogs. So we wanted them to get more, utilized to the first set of activities, 6 activities which we gave, was to be sent us on mail. The second set of activities, they were supposed to put it on their blogs, create few videos, content, and upload it on a blog and send us the links. So from these activities, we were able to almost like 33,000 teacher approximately, they made their own blogs. So it was definitely difficult for them. They went ahead, they went to the government. There was a complaint to the government that why only in Kalaburagi they are supposed to do assignments and no other place they are doing any assignments. But ultimately, when they were able to put it on blog and they got appreciation, we had workshop with them. We asked them to share their experiences. It was a very worthwhile experience for them also. Now, with these two things, we realized one thing that, with as far as our children are concerned, we cannot go with online classes because, access is a very big issue. And as far as teachers are concerned, we can actually, we need to train them for as much online as they can and utilize this time to improve their skills. So these are the two things which we were concentrating on. And suddenly there is something which came from the ground, from one school, one HM. They started in Oakley, in Kalaburagi, they started something called Vatara Shale. So these school teachers, they came up, they each one of them went to the different, small places in their area, in their Gram Panchayati, and they started teaching these kids in the open spaces, a group of some 20 kids. They called it Vatara Shale, and then we thought that it is a very good concept. The only problem was that we could not have gone the traditional way of learning. Like we needed more activity-based integrated content, so that continuity of learning was there, and assessment could be done in that manner. So we focused on Prayog, Darpan, some experiment based learning, activity-based learning, Setu Bandha, and all those things we concentrated, and we informally started it in our division in the starting of August. By end of August, the department issued a circular for Vidyagama, which was a bit different. It was still more on, WhatsApp communication, online education, use of YouTube, and everything else. Whereas we realized that, we still will not be able to reach more than 20 to 30% kids if we are going by that model. So we had requested for giving us the freedom to implement it the way we want to, and that was allowed in the circular. So we went ahead with Vatara Shala again, and by the time the circular came out, we had around about 2000 Vatara Shale running. It started in early August. By end of August, we had some 2000 Vatara Shale running, and in a month's time, we had around about 33,000 Vatara Shales running, and we had around about 9 lakh kids, which we were able to reach out to. In some way, we were able to ensure continuity of learning. We kept doing a weekly review and training in learning to learn, pedagogical concepts of learning to learn, integrated approach, activity-based learning, and we kept focusing on these things. We kept asking the HMs and teachers to present what innovative works they have been able to do. So it went on for quite some time. Then the government took a conscious decision that they wanted to stop Vidyagama because of some problems which happened. And again, we were stuck. So we took help from Gram Panchayati department. They started something called Oduva Beluko. So now the activities which we were doing in different groups, somewhere sitting here and there in form of a Vatara Shale open schools, they shifted towards library. And then we had 10 weeks of theme-based activities near the library. And on an average, again, we had the same basic modalities, weekly, taking reviews, monitoring, and at the same time doing training and everything. So these themes included everything starting from child abuse, protection, safety and protection issues, registering them to library, just reading books, different project-based activities also, them presenting it in different manners. So again, we utilize the project-based learning to learn, integrated approach, activity-based learning, and we shifted everything towards library. This went on for 10 weeks. And after that, I think the government took a conscious decision that they wanted to open up the schools, and slowly the schools open up. Yeah. So we could manage. So during these activities also, in each different teams, we had on an average around 6 to 8 lakh kids, which we were able to reach out to. In my division, I have around about 13 lakh kids who are there in government institutions, government schools.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, lot of things happen, at the field level. But now coming to, as Shaheen also spoke about many studies and things like that. Now at a macro level, many research studies are showing that the learning gap, in fact, if you look at World Bank report, which talks about, learning poverty prior to COVID. Right? So this learning gap has been deepening and deepening and deepening. In fact, in Akshara, our own survey showed that only 8% of grade 4 children could crack around 70 to 80% of grade 3 math competency. So, I mean, there are so many evidences which are talking about, the learning gap definitely exists and is widening as well. Now, coming to Rishi, I mean, we all know that Azim Premji University also, did a lot of studies around learning gaps during learning loss rather. So, can you please share some of the findings of that study?
Yeah, sure, Vaijanti. So as I think, we've been hearing Shaheen spoke about it, and, we all know about it, and, you have done the study. So one thing that has come out from around the world is that, children have not learned over 2 years. It's had a severe impact, and worse, whatever they had learned 2 years ago has also been forgotten to a large extent, which makes the situation far more complex than what we can imagine. So, in fact, when we did this study in the latter half of so January 2021 is when we released this, just about a year ago. And it just reiterated what pretty much everyone was saying, right? So in that sense, it was not something shocking for anyone. Though, of course, since this was a study which was spread across 25, 26 districts over 5 states, it was kind of once again telling us as to the situation is really, really poor. And when schools reopen, or even before that, with programs such as Sri Nalini ji was saying in terms of Vidyagama, or other such programs in other states, it was very important that something was done on an urgent basis. Because in terms of the findings, very quickly to share with you, we had in language, 92% of children on an average having lost at least one specific language ability from the previous year across all districts. So across all districts, one specific core language ability. So if we are talking about early years, we are talking about recognition of letters, right? 90% and more children having forgotten something like that. If it is slightly later years, unable to comprehend a passage. So 90% of children not being able to do that. So this was the kind of data that we got from the field across the districts that we went to. So this number, of course, was slightly lesser as the classes, the higher classes were checked or assessed, but then it was all in that 85 to 90%. So in that sense, very large numbers. And similar was the case in mathematics. 80 to 90% of the children unable to identify one specific mathematical ability. Now, when you're talking about mathematical ability, you're just talking about recognition of 2-digit numbers, simple addition, right? When such large number of children are unable to perform such a very simple, basic mathematical operation, or describing a picture, reading a few words in language, then we need to really think of this as an emergency situation. As Shaheen rightly said, it's something that we should have thought about, because we knew that this was a pandemic. We knew that this is going to last. All indications were towards that. So I guess we should, as a country, I mean, this is not just about, as a government or as a department running education, but as a country, we could have been better prepared, because they were learning from the past. In fact, in one of the articles while I was researching, I realized that the learnings from pandemics such as the Ebola pandemic, that thankfully we were saved from it, but Africa suffered massively. So when schools were shut for even 3 months, 4 months, the kind of impact it had. So those children whose schools were shut were 50% less likely to have had the foundational basic literacy and numeracy. And we're talking about the 9 to 14-year-olds. Right now, this is a data that already existed there. And 2015, the earthquake in Pakistan shut down a large number of schools in that area for more than a year. And the kind of impact it had on the learning of the children there. So these were all data that we had. And unfortunately, none of us really started talking about it in advance. It's only once the shutdown had happened and we knew children were not coming to school that we started researching about it, writing about it. And I think, we should have been better prepared for this. And of course, after that, a large number of studies, even the I.A.S survey finally did show that even at grade 5, when we know so many children cannot really compete or rather perform a grade 2 specific ability, even that number has increased, right? That's what the I.A.S survey showed us. Jean Reyes did some fabulous work on the ground in Jharkhand, and he saw that children had forgotten to just simply read simple poems and their grade appropriate textbooks, and there was nothing in the name of formal learning that was happening in many of these remote villages. And so that is what has happened over the 2 years. Thankfully, because we've had officers such as Sri Nalini, I think we have Dr. Selvakumar also coming in on the panel later. We've had some of these officers who are clued into what's happening on the ground. And so there were many efforts that did take place. But I think overall, in terms of when we see as to what's happened in the country, it's been a huge tragedy. And at this point of time, as we speak, we are in an education emergency, and we ought to do something very different from what we otherwise would normally do in a normal academic year. And I think that's really something that all of us need to now put our heads together and do, because we didn't do when we were supposed to do about 2 years ago.
Yeah, true. In fact, this is a question to both of you. Like, there are many research studies which have been telling us what has been the gap, and then, people like Nalini have experimented many, I wouldn't call them pilot, but a large scale, implementation of programs and things like that. So, both of you, what have been the learnings these last 18 months? Can we kind of make I wouldn't say a checklist, but at least the broad areas where we need to focus, what have been the learnings and things like that? Because it is not just 3 months of the school closure, or 5 months. It is solid 18 to 19 months. I mean, so many days of instructional time we have lost, right? So, what do you think that, at least at the macro level, some 2-3 outcomes, that we have learned in this pandemic? Nalini?
Okay, again, thank you for the question. I think one of the biggest learning for me was the failure in the crash course that we did, and the realization that online is not going to work for me as of now, and access is a very big problem. So I still believe, after that I did a lot of research, and I went through the data and NSS, SSO data, all the census data, everything that was available, latest data points which were available, and we realized that in the best case scenario we'll be reaching 20% of the kids if we are focusing on online. So and I think that is also one of the outcomes of I think Azim Premji University came up with one more increase in poverty during the pandemic. There was a report, and that also said that even further the incomes of a household has reduced for almost each and every one, and poor have lost at least 7 to 10% of their income. So the investment in education is going to be lesser and lesser. Expecting things to become online would be more and more difficult for us. So online will be far reality. That is something which I mean, that is one of the most important learning for me. Second most important learning, that in the education, the creative environment of education that we are, I think teacher will always play the central role, and they are the people, they are the ones who will come up with many new innovative ideas. They will always have a solution in their hand, because these solutions will be designed within the compound walls of a school, and they'll be very relevant for us. So the learning that teachers are at the center of all the creative work that we are able to do and the outcomes that we are able to create. And also the importance that they should be heard, their ideas, it should be taken up, because it has possibility of changing the landscape. I think one more very important learning, I think, that is there for the whole of the world is that we cannot imagine the classroom in the traditional formats in which we have been imagining. And I think in a way, pandemic has helped us understand that, to really change pedagogy, I think, or to have effective learning in a classroom, I think the traditional classroom that we have as on today, or we had prior to pandemic, is probably not a very good structure or not a very good setting in which good learning can happen. Classroom or class fourth for smaller kids. So that is that has been a very important learning, because if we want the educational outcomes to improve and better pedagogical interventions in a classroom, we need to start imagining classrooms in a different formats. I think important aspect or a learning that has been there for me personally also from the ground, and whatever has happened over the period of last one and a half year, is that we actually need assessment reforms. The formative assessment that we have been talking about since 2005, it has actually not reached to my classroom even till today. And we are still obsessed with examinations, and that does not help learning outcomes. We are just giving them one certificate when they are leaving us. We are not assessing their issues. We are not assessing the problems. We are not giving good solutions at the time when we can nurture and improve them. So that is one thing which also needs I mean, a lot of reforms is required in that. As far as learning loss is concerned, one thing that I learned is, us talking about learning loss is putting the burden on the child. So I would not call it as learning loss. It is not a learning loss. Yes, we have, maybe lost some time. If we work with children with proper, materials, they'll be able to cope up, and they'll learn what they were supposed to learn. The skills appropriate which they need will be there with them. But yes, obviously we need our teachers and the whole system, as far as government is concerned, the whole system to be geared in that direction for the children to, able to learn what they were supposed to be learning. And, probably over a period of time, it can be filled up. That is my hunch. And that has been my learning. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Rishi?
Yeah, thank you. So I completely agree with Nalini ji on this, that, we really can't bank upon online solutions as, as something that would solve our problems, even in situations such as this, because, the reason why some of these innovative programs came about on the ground is because the teachers themselves felt that online was not going to work. And as Nalini ji said, left to them, then they came up with these solutions of how do you then go about using worksheets, what to do with children in the mohalla setting, in these habitations, or even when the Vidyagama 2.0 happened within the school, because other issues were creeping into the learning environment when it was done outside in the society. So when it was done in the school, the way they went about creating material, now it was the teacher's agency really working up the entire curricula, and that turned out to be very beautiful, right? And this is because online did not work, and initially many of us felt that it could work, but then very soon it showed that it is just not going to take us anywhere. And of course, NFHS surveys and everything else, and we also did another study, and very clearly, in fact, the reason why we titled the study as the myth of online learning was because it just showed the opposite of what was being expected of an online learning environment. I mean, there were majority of children who just could not access anything meaningful, even through an online mode. So remember, we need to hear, I mean, this is a big learning. We need to separate this from just access to some digital devices which can provide you a platform. Finally, what is the learning that it will provide, right? So that really is what many studies have shown that it does not provide the kind of learning, even though all those social aspects and things like that are going to be missed out when children are not going to be within their peer environment. Even if you say that all that is fine, even with regard to learning formal concepts, that's not going to happen as well as it would happen in an in-person situation. This is what studies said. In fact, in one of my articles, I did bring, I connected this point to a study that was done in Netherlands. Now, Netherlands is the best case scenario. You have the best broadband bandwidth in Europe, and schools were closed for the least amount of time. Now, from 2017 to 2020, they took assessment results, biannual assessment results of children, nearly 15% of the Dutch children, 3.5 lakh children across many grades. And when they saw as to what had happened when the schools were shut for such short time, during the pandemic, they saw that 1/5 of that school year learning was lost. And if children were coming from slightly disadvantaged backgrounds, the impact was 60% more. And this we are seeing in the best case scenario. Now, as Nalini ji is saying, I mean, how can we even talk about an online solution to any learning? When we come there, decades later, maybe we could think about using it in a more effective way. But today, what we really need to provide is probably access to online resources to the teachers. I was very happy to hear Shaheen speak about something that Teach for India has come up with. I would like to go and check that out. So these kinds of resources for teachers to then take it to their classrooms and use it, it can't be brought to the student level, right? And that's a huge learning, because just getting a device, just having broadband is completely insufficient. In fact, there is so much that goes along with that to ensure that even that learning environment is feasible for some kind of good grasp to take place. Even at the university level, unless our student has a separate room, has a stable connection, that student is not able to engage or participate in the class. And this is something which is so weak even in the cities. In fact, when we in Azim Premji University went into online learning, we sent money across to our students to move into district headquarters and rent a room so that there's some stability in terms of the connection, right? And even though they did that, in terms of the engagement that they were able to get into in terms of the classroom discussions was abysmally poor. And it just didn't feel like there was any meaningful learning taking place. And so that's something very, very important. And the other thing, I think Nalini ji again brought about this very important point of assessments, which have to go on to a paradigm shift. We are obsessed with these summative board assessments, which is just for the certification. What about formative assessments that need to come in as part of the teaching learning environment? Now, these are the areas in which we need a lot of work, because these are completely absent. And this, came to the fore when schools were shut and teachers were trying to do something. The formative assessment aspect, they were a bit raw, and they did not have enough exposure or enough support in terms of what kinds of formative assessments can take place. And so that's another big learning. 3 is in terms of what is it that we're trying to do in the name of education. That's the big learning. If we say that it is just about, rote learning some concepts, and then there are going to be these exams at grade 10, grade 12, where you, as much as you remember, that's the kind of marks that you get, then you're talking of a different kind of education. You can very well probably do it on a, in a remote basis. But then, when you're talking about the kind of education which aligns to the educational aims that our country has, then, we really need to rethink as to how is it that we're going to look at the curriculum. What is it that is the core in the curriculum? How is it that we're going to engage with it? And it's only when we realize that curricular learning outcomes going to come out only when together as a group, the teacher, the teachers, and all the children together through various activities can come out with in terms of meeting a learning objective. It is only then that meaningful learning is going to take place. And that's another big learning. Everything that is being let's say, hoped for, aspired for through the documents such as the National Curricular Framework 2005. That's something that we actually got to see over the last 2 years, that we are nowhere to be able to move in that direction. And those are the paradigm shifts that we require. And and what is beautiful is that at least in many states, and particularly so in Karnataka, given that we have officers at the top being able to understand this so well, and they knowing what's happening on the ground, even though they're right at the top in terms of the bureaucracy, that is absolutely fabulous, because that's something that is a prerequisite, right? So it is only when that is already in place that we can actually start hoping for these paradigm shifts. And that's why I'm really very hopeful as well with regard to this.
Thank you. I mean, in fact, both of you kind of gave a lot of insights as to, what has to be the way forward to mitigate this learning loss. And I completely agree with both of you. It is not just, the digital learning and the device, etc. It's only one part of the puzzle. You need to create an ecosystem, and you need to work with different aspects of that. For example, the curriculum, as Rishi said, and the assessment part of it. If it is, if it is a different, if there's a paradigm shift in learning, in coming days, then we need to think about how do we design a CTE kind of a model in blended learning process. But I think everything is kind of leading us to think more seriously about the blended learning and blended learning models that might, we may have to live with those models, right? Wave 3 is already there at our doorsteps, and then we really don't know when schools will shut and how are we going to manage it, and so on and so forth, right? Thanks a lot. Thank you for your, insightful discussion about the learning gaps and what should we be doing in coming days, and so on and so forth. Now, I request people to ask questions if they have any, and then we can take it forward.
Yeah, there's one question coming from Bamish and I on, I think it's for Nalini, Atul sir, on how do we mobilize the libraries, number one, in the Gram Panchayat level, and how do we promote parents as teachers and and create some student mentoring programs. And if you can tell what ideas you have, or if there's anything that you have implemented in the field, that'd be good.
Okay, I think so. The question was as to the number of libraries which are there. So in my division, there are around about, I think, 1,200 libraries. Each Gram Panchayati has at least one Gram Panchayati library which is there. Not digital, but at least 10 to 20% of them were already digital when we were conceiving the idea, when we were trying to think of as to what can be done. But as soon as we realized that this is the only solution and Vatarashale was not going forward, so we had to shift our everything towards libraries. So we shifted our teachers to the libraries, and then we started activities around libraries. And Gram Panchayati was providing us whatever if there was some for activity, if there was some funding that was required, that was being provided by the PDOs, because there was a joint circular issued by the principal secretary of both the Department of Education and Panchayati Raj Department, and the CEOs at their level. They were also getting involved. We had a lot of training exercise which happened before that for them to understand that what is it that we are trying to do. We had around about 8 lakh children in our division only who were registered with public libraries out of the total 14 lakh students which are there. Some 8 lakh children were registered with the libraries. So Karnataka has had a history of having public libraries. I think since 1960s there is a Public Library Act. There are a huge number of libraries which are existing. We have librarians in almost all libraries. They are the qualification and all are different. They are not may or may not be very well qualified, but those things are also being worked upon, because once we started doing Oduwa Belku, we realized the problems with the public library. So now we are already designing a 3-month certification program for a a child-friendly library. So that certification program, most of the thing is ready. Once it is accepted by a university, that program will be available for librarians. So we were able to mobilize, the existing infrastructure with the help of Panchayati Raj department, and we were able to reach around about 6 to 8 lakh kids in each week. I told you it was a 10-week theme-based activities which we had in Odu Belukam. So we were able to reach. Again, I'll not claim that all the data that I collected or was given to me by my teachers are 100% correct. Even if it was 60-70%, I'll take that numbers. It's a very good number for me because we were able to ensure continuity of learning for that many number of children. And the approach that we were utilizing actually helps learn child a lot. We were, targeting curiosity. We were targeting them doing surveys. We were asking them to do their own presentations in front of, the Gram Panchayati. The whole Gram Panchayati will organize a program. A lot of children had done their book reviews. They presented their book reviews in front of principal secretary. The principal secretary was sitting on a dais, and small girl children, they came and they presented their book reviews which they had done because a book was given to them and they were asked to do a book review. There was a Makkal Snehi Gram Panchayati kind of a concept which was done, in which children, they actually gave their demands to us. So we actually collected demands from their side. They were asking for, some cases they were asking for toilet, in some cases, some specific school, they were asking for something, some books to be given. We also realized that we need to have more child, age appropriate books in the library, for which then we had a lot of drives which went on. Almost all the NGOs, different NGOs, including APF actually provided some 9 lakh books in 9 districts. Pratham contributed with a lot of books. There was a Pustaka Jolige program. These kids, they went on, asking for books in their own localities, in their Gram Panchayati, and they collected books from their Gram Panchayati. So these are the kind of activities which was there. I cannot put it in the traditional sense of examination, passing an examination, or how much marks should be given to these activities. But yes, there was a lot of learning happening, and we were able to utilize, we were able to do actually 2 very important things. We were able to rejuvenate the libraries, and we were also able to utilize the library as learning centers for our kids. Earlier, generally, these libraries were not open to kids because there was some registration fees, and also we removed those registration fees. We asked our teachers to go and ensure that our kids are, registered with the libraries. So with the focus that we were able to do, we had around about 8 lakh kids which were registered after the efforts that we put. So good. It was very good outcome as far as I am concerned. Cannot be put in the specific numbers, except for the participation numbers which we had. I also had a lot of girls, because as a part of thematic activity, they were supposed to write to me about a letter campaign. They were write to us that they will not allow child marriage to happen. They will not themselves get married. So I had like thousands of letters which had come to my office, which they had sent to me. I wrote back. We wrote back. We made a standard reply for all this.
I think that itself can become a good research material for somebody to do research, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, it only shows that there are several ways of approaches to mitigate learning gaps. That's all it says, and I think the collaboration, whether it is civil society organization with civil society organization, or with other departments like RDPR, or say like library department, etc. I think that kind of a collaboration would also lead us to some kind of mitigating the learning gaps in the future. Anyway, thanks a lot for this insightful, discussion from all of you. And now over to Pushpa, right?
Vaijanti, if I could just make one quick point.
Please.
Yeah, no, you see, one more thing that, we should take away as a learning is that, we need to think about various ways in which we can decentralize as much as possible, various decision-making things that, particularly from the department side. And I think wherever, the department did that, we did see, a lot of positive work that happened. So, many things, for instance, when schools shut down, can be decisions that can get taken at the school level with the STMC, with the Gram Panchayat. And I think we should think about it as a way forward in terms of, except for the key decisions that could happen at the district or the state level, the rest, if it can happen at the school level. And obviously with NEP giving us this framework of a school complex, and I think, taking these learnings, we would probably be moving in the right direction. Thank you. Thank you so much for this time and for having me over.
Thank you.
I think
so much.
I just had one small point to add to what Rishi was telling. Because of the the things that we were doing with Odu Veluku and all, the Panchayati Raj department, they came up with children budgeting in their third year of the government. That is for the first in the country. I think no other state has children budgeting kind of a concept in the Gram Panchayati level. And we do realize, I mean, as Rishi was already telling, the SDMC involvement of SDMC, Gram Panchayati in what is happening in education, because they are dealing with the sector. As a third year of government, they are dealing with education as a sector. So if decision making and investment comes from them, they are there to see what are the outcomes. So they will be able to do better monitoring. They'll be able to do better, take better decisions. So it's a very valid and very important point, which is also one of the very important learning of this pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over to Pushpa.
Yeah, thank you so much to all the panelists, to Nalini, Atul sir, and to Rishi sir. Thank you, Vaijayanti. So it was sort of several pilots were done about online learning, and the reach was slow. Several studies, of course. So what's the answer? Answer could be the implementation of blended learning. And that gives us a segue to our next panel discussion on blended learning models, which is moderated by Mr. Ashok Kamath. Mr. Ashok Kamath is the chairman and managing trustee of Akshara Foundation. He has been actively involved in the strategic planning, analysis, and expansion of programs at every stage. He's an alumnus of IIT Mumbai. He was formerly the managing director of the Indian operations of analog devices. He opted to leave behind a successful career in the corporate world and then involve himself in the development sector. In April 2019, he was conferred the prestigious Namma Bengalurian Award for his exemplary work in education. His alma mater, IIT Mumbai, presented him with the Distinguished Alumnus Award in 2013 for the various initiatives and contributions in the field of education. Ashok is also the co-founder and trustee of Pratham Books and trustee of Shreyas Foundation, Ahmedabad. Over to you, Ashok.
Thank you, Pushpa. We've just heard what happened during the pandemic. I think I'd like to look at what we need to do as we go forward. And it was, it's not like all of us did nothing at all. Some of us did a little bit here and there that could make a difference. One of the best investments that I think Akshara made over the last 5-6 years was investing on a property called Building Blocks, which put the entire 1st to 5th grade math curriculum on as a set of 275 games that would run off an Android platform and an entry-level Android platform. And we made that available in public in 9 languages. It could work offline or online. And it was separated by grade. So 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, it had practice modes and challenge modes. So we made an investment there. And I think in parallel, I think there were other efforts made by others and the government. The Diksha platform comes to mind. And the concept of the energized textbook comes to mind. Now, all these were out there, I think, little before the pandemic. And I suspect that the pandemic brought many, many opportunities for us to innovate and use these assets to do things differently. The national education policy also talks about learning with a blend of teachers plus technology. It talks about engaging with the community. It talks about assessments. And it talks about having a technology framework at the bottom. And most importantly, it talks about teacher training. And I think it's time for us to take a problem-solving approach to look forward as to what we can collectively do. One of my biggest frustrations was that while our mainstream media has been talking about every other topic, education for our children has never been on the 7 o'clock news, 8 o'clock news, or 9 o'clock news. I mean, that's been a disappointment for me over the last 2 years. Although the implications, as you've seen from one of Shaheen's slides, is enormous into the future. Today on my panel on blended learning, I have two people who can make a lot of difference. Dr. Selva Kumar currently holds concurrently 2 offices, Principal Secretary of Primary and Secondary Education, as also for skilling and development, which I believe is his first love. But he's been involved with education even in the past. I've known him since the time when he was the State Project Director for Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. He's a man of many letters. He's an engineer, has a degree in civil engineering. He's a lawyer. He's done a degree in law. He's done a master's in international development, and then he has a PhD. So I think very learned in multifaceted way. Also, what I find unique is that he served both the Chief Minister of the state and the Prime Minister of the country. So he's had opportunities to work close to the centers of power. So, maybe, that brings other insights from him. So Dr. Selva Kumar, welcome to the panel. Sarvesh Karodia is a principal at Omidyar Investments. His job is essentially to locate people like Akshara and Teach for India, source us, nurture us, and bring us to a level where we can make a large social impact. And I think Omidyar has done a fascinating job in this country. Sarvesh is specialized in the area of finance. He has a MBA from the Indian Institute of Management in Kozhikode, and also from the CFAI, and a degree in basically in commerce. So Sarvesh also has been in the education sphere for several years now. Without talking more about them, I'm sure you can find enough about them if you just Google their names. I want to go to the questions, and essentially the questions are, in the early days of 2021, January, February, March, April, Akshara did 2 interesting pilots of using a concept of teacher plus technology. The pilots were limited because we didn't have the resources in terms of devices, but a child got exposed to technology for half the week and teacher for half the week. And we created dual lesson plans, and that seemed to work a lot. The results that we got, admittedly, over a short period of 3-4 months, so therefore not very, deeply rigorous as I would imagine. But it was still pointing out in the right directions that it could work. And what it brought to the fore was a few questions need to be answered, especially in the areas that the NEP already talks about. It starts with the first area that I want to talk about and ask you the questions would be on teachers. As and when you bring in blended learning, the traditional classroom teaching, kind of is almost historical, and you have to look at new ways of doing things. So the question means that we need to do extensive capacity building for our teachers. First of all, for them to know that technology does not displace teachers. Technology is supposed to help teachers to do a better job, or to do a job in the circumstances that we are in. So the question really is, and I'll start with Dr. Selva Kumar, do you agree with this first principle of getting the teachers as an integral mix in this whole thing? And how should we go about implementing something like this?
Mr. Ashok, thank you. It's a pleasure to interact with you all. We have a difficult time. We have gone through difficult times. and the days to come also looks to be challenging to all of us. For the last 2 years, whatever we have lost in terms of learning loss or in terms of financial loss, it's irreparable. It takes its own time to heal, and it takes years and months to bring it back. So in such a scenario, the investment in terms of capital intensive technological innovations, and also the ICT ICT required background material, it's a real challenge for all of us. I agree that the teachers require to be attuned to the technological challenges and technological requirement. They need to be given a capacity building orientation. But after that, how we take it to the classroom, that's a big challenge for all of us. You all must be aware that the last 2 years, when we talk about online learning, it's only we are talking about around 30% of children who are in urban areas, but remaining 70% are totally left out in the whole process. Whatever we try to do through our Doordarshan or All India Radio or our through our different methodologies, but it's still a challenge. It's not percolating to the last mile students. Most of our government school students are from either rural area or from the disadvantageous background, so they need to be empowered through teachers. So the teachers are the real tool for us to bring them back into the fold. So the technological innovation and technological bridge which is there can be a help if we properly train our teachers how to use it and how to take it to the children. So this challenge is there. In the field, you all must be doing something or other in different ways, but the scale is a big challenge for all of us. Around 49,000 schools and 220,000 teachers, reaching them with the kind of capacity building which is expected to be to take them to the minimum level of technology learning is a challenge for all of us.
Sir, I think our back of the envelope calculation shows that for 100 million children, you will need about 30,000 crores so that there is a device available for every child for 3 days in a week, and there is a data plan for that device. So 30,000 crores is really not a big sum. Sarvesh, what do you think?
Yeah, I would not comment on that number, Ashok.
Yeah. So what is your view on this teacher training?
Yeah, let me share that. First of all, thanks Ashok for having me here, and hello to Dr. Selva Kumar, all the other panelists and everyone who's attending. Great to speak with you all. I think first of all, I think I'll be surprised if anyone in the ecosystem, including the teachers, will disagree with what you've said, right? Both with the fact that there's a need for technology and the fact that there's also training required, for them as we're entering this new age of blended learning. I think even before we get to, the training part of it, I would say there are fundamental principles in terms of the kind of tech that, needs to be adopted and hence the training required. And I would say there are probably 3 principles that one could even think of. One is the feasibility to use given the infrastructure that is available, right? And I would say the low-hanging fruit should be to start with the infrastructure that is already available. So for example, teacher smartphone is something that is I would say widely available across the ecosystem. So how do we even leverage that? Like WhatsApp is, widely used by teachers. So how do we leverage that? I think that is one. The other is any solution that we're using, how, is it easy to use by the teachers and the students? The moment we make it complex, I think we increase the friction, which is required for the usage. And I would say the third thing is even making it very contextual. So for example, are the solutions in local languages versus English, right? Can you actually make the solution work in a low cost phone or a low bandwidth environment? And Ashok, you guys have done a lot of work in Akshara in rolling out those features. But I think just doing that on a broad-based basis, making it contextual, I think is very, very critical. So I think these 3 parameters, I would first of all say that are important, for using any tech, in the system. And I'm sure there might be other critical factors as well. And then I think it's about, okay, once we have the right technology, how do we sort of train teachers to do that? And I think there are, again, two key principles, that are required in terms of the orientation that they need to do. One is just the using the software part of it, which is the technical part of it, right? And I actually think between the two, it's the relatively easier problem to solve for if you've taken into account some of the considerations that I mentioned on the tech, that you're using. Because a lot of this could be product led in the way that products are being designed today, where there could be nudges on the solution, there could be videos that are there on the solution that actually direct the teachers on how they are using it. And of course, there are training programs as well that are out there. But I think that's the easier problem to solve for. The second, which is the more difficult part of the training, is actually how do they integrate this blended learning, which is this physical plus the digital, because it is a new way of them for doing things, right? And imagine, let's say one such solution where an app that collects data on the children learning. So there's assessment that children are doing, and that throws data back to the teacher that, okay, this is where the gaps are, and this is hence what you need to do in the classroom. Now, this is a big leap for them given what they were doing earlier. So I think one, yes, you will need to train them initially, but what is required is a constant handholding, which is a regular feedback mechanism, because you can't train those teachers in 1 or 2 days or 3 days saying that, okay, this is the app and this is how you should go and use it. There has to be a mechanism where someone is probably going in that classroom, on a regular basis and giving him or her feedback, saying this is where, the classroom is probably going well, this is where they're not going well. And I think that is something that we'll have to bake into the, the training process, is how do you make it a regular, sort of affair as opposed to a one time or a once in a year kind of a system. And I think studies have also shown that when there is a regular feedback loop that is done, that is actually more effective from a teacher training perspective. And I think this will be as critical for the tech training part of it as it is for the pedagogical part of it.
Yeah. So taking off from there, brings you to content, right? I mean, if you're talking technology, then the first thing is, what about content? There is a platform called Diksha, on which I think pretty much every state is now invested heavily in. But admittedly, none of these platforms are perfect. Okay, they are all just early. They are in early stages of their life cycle. I still feel that there is a shortage of good quality content in local languages available. So clearly, two things come to mind, right? One is definitely, I think teachers can generate some content, and if you can encourage them enough, they can, put them up on the Diksha platform and link it to the curriculum. So if you have a chapter on gravity, they can do little experiments on gravity that they have done, take videos and make it available. You could also encourage non-profit players to create new content and make it available in multiple languages and so on and so forth for national use, and in the Creative Commons open source kind of framework. And the third, of course, is there are all these edtech companies are making a killing with their valuations. Do you see a role for them? So the first question from the government perspective is, and Dr. Selvakumar, is, can we encourage teachers and non-profits to create more content, more and more content? And how would you go about doing that?
Yes, Mr. Ashok, you're right that we need to create more contents, and it should be easily understood by the students as well as the teacher. Both of them should be happy with the material. So that kind of content is required. From our department, we are trying our best to involve the teachers, local teachers, to create the content and also to upload them in Diksha portal. But that's not sufficient. So we need to collaborate with not-for-profit NGOs like Akshara. We have already collaboration with Akshara, APF, Khan Academy, and also Sikshana Foundation. So this kind of involvement in bringing the content, innovative content into the fold will be a very useful tool for our teachers, so that it can be easily taught to the children in a simplified manner. It requires time and effort from both the NGO side and also from our side. but it's worth doing it because it directly impacts the outcome of the education level. I think our collaboration should be more dynamic, and also it should be at all levels in a meaningful engagement.
Sarvesh, what do you think the role of for-profit should be, since you were involved in, I think, Vedantu?
Yeah, sir, we've invested in several of them.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, Ashok, I'll also answer your previous question in terms of content creation. I actually agree partly with it. I do think that, there is some content that has already been built, and I think that process only got accelerated post-COVID. So there is already some content, and what I would, urge everyone is to look at what has already been created, use it, and then see whatever is not created, then probably create content around it, rather than recreating content, because a lot of times I see that orgs end up creating the same content which probably is available with someone else, but you can always create something little better. There is no end to it. But I think just from an efficiency perspective, which is what we should solve for right now, is to reuse whatever we have. And I think post-COVID, what was heartening to see is like several orgs did come together in sharing their resources and making sure you're building off each other, as opposed to replicating. I think, answering your second question, which is around the for-profit players, I think certainly, and I would say, they're already playing a role, to a certain extent even now. And the reason I say this is because when you look at the for-profit players, content creation actually has been a very integral part of their strategy, right? Like for a business reason, probably you could say it, but actually free content serves as a way for them to invite students to their platform and as a result build their brand. So, you will see across even our portfolio companies, be it, Vedantu, Doubtnut, Kutuki, Yulo, they have a lot of free content, be it on their YouTube channels or be it on their app. And that is something that they've been, working on it for a long time now. And you'll see there are lots of these resources. Even an organization called Centa, which is in the teacher, which is a teacher-focused community platform. They've also, been putting a bunch of resources, again, both free and paid, but there are a lot of free resources as well, where teachers can use it to get trained, to get assessed, to get placed, etc. So I do think they are, be it for profit, not for profit, I think the entire ecosystem has a role to play. And I think some of the for-profit ones, are already playing a role. And yes, I'm sure they'll do more, going forward.
So let's move to another problem area, is assessment, right? Our assessment frameworks have not been very, very effective. Let's put it that way. I think Nalini ji was talking about how, CC was not being done and, all those kind of things. I feel that once you have a channel between the teacher and the learner of a device, even if it's for part of the week, you actually have the ability to pump in continuous and comprehensive evaluations regularly and give the teacher the ability to see immediately, not wait for 3-4 months for the results to come out, but like in a day or two, as soon as she's finished assessing her class, she should be able to see the strengths and weaknesses of her class, and then therefore tailor her instruction based on those strengths and weaknesses. So what do you think of that, Dr. Selvakumar?
I completely agree with you regarding the concurrent assessment, which is supposed to be there in the system. CCE is a real good tool if we implement it in true perspective. One challenge I have is the access. As we have already discussed, the access is a big challenge. Whether we can provide continuous feedback to the at least 1 lakh teachers, if not 2.2 lakh teachers. So it's a real challenge. One. Second is that the technological availability, which again is a major challenge. As you have already pointed out, that it takes at least 30,000 crores to invest in terms of
for 100 million
for 100 million children. Yeah, we are having roughly the 100 million children in our system. So it's I don't know in how many years of budgeting we can reach that kind of a target. but nevertheless, it's a good tool to do the assessment. In fact, NCF 2005 completely talks about CCF in a different mode. May not be a traditional assessment only. So if we have to take it seriously and sincerely, then we need to percolate it down to all levels, and it's a big challenge to all of us.
And is it administratively doable for you?
No, if it's a limited numbers, yes, we can try at different levels. Maybe at the 11th and 12th level we can try and do it, or high school level we can try it. But at all levels, I think with the present kind of a budgeting and the present kind of technological population, we may be finding it difficult to reach.
Mm-hmm. So since you've been talking about difficulties of budgeting, and I know we are a little over time, I want to go straight to the key question that I have always been struggling with, is that in 2001, the central government came up with the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan as a trust for 15 years or 20 years or whatever it is. Given the fact that the lack of digital infrastructure is causing us so much grief for our children, is it time for us to think of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan and make a national investment on digital infrastructure? Because remember, in the last 18 odd months, we've spent 212,000 crores on food subsidies. We've spent close to 100,000 crores on vaccines. I'm not disputing the importance of that. All I'm saying is education not important enough that we invest 30, 40, 50,000 crores over the next 2-3 years to bridge and disrupt this digital divide? Is the last question I have, and I'd love to have both your views on this.
No, we would love to have that kind of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan which can bring in technology, but when we look at the country level, whether all other states are already reach the minimum access level, minimum quality level, which is expected to be in the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. But as a state, Karnataka would like to have that kind of an approach. One thing is that the kind of budgeting which we require to have, one. Second is the technological availability, technological challenges. Second part easily we can tackle. The first part is a real challenge. So I think if the government of India is open enough and if they are willing to look at ESSA, then it will be a nice one for all of us.
So if it is socially desirable, why can't it be politically acceptable?
See, unfortunately, the vocal group for our clients, that is the students, they are all not enough vocal to mobilize that kind of a political pressure on the system. Only the parents can do it, but most of the 90% of the parents in our system is still to come up to that level of argumentative and also the addressing valid points to the real policy decision makers.
Sarvesh, can the impact investing group look at creating an Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan?
I don't know if you
some sort, at least drive the concept of it.
You can probably do it at a pilot scale, but given the budget you're talking about, I don't know if that is something.
No, but the conversation.
We did that, right? When you look at the district project that we did, and which is where let's say when I funded a small part of it, there are those that I think the impact community can fund, right? And that's already happening. But the scale at which you're talking about, to be fair and honest, I don't think so. The investment community can do it. You can spur innovation, right? You can do bits and parts of it to accelerate it. But really, given the budget you're talking about, it has to come from the government. But I do want to second what you're saying. When you look at the next sort of few years, I do think that tech is going to, differentiate how you're using tech is going to differentiate how schools, good schools from not so good schools. Because I think the good schools and will figure out how
that technological divide is already happening in the
already happening.
Yes.
Yeah. And it will only get worse. So I think to improve the other side of the story, I think we will have to make investments in tech. I don't think so we can now shy away from it.
Yeah. So I think if you listen to the earlier panels, and I know you guys were on board, I mean, everyone is saying that the child is now what can be fashionably called thrice removed from the grade. So if she was in second grade in 2019 and will be in fifth grade in June, but she doesn't know what third, fourth, and fifth grade means. She has lost that whole gap because of shutdowns, and the curriculum is moving, but she's still 2 years or 3 years behind. So this thing is a very disturbing phenomenon, and I think we need to have lots and lots of solutions tested and scaled up rapidly. If you just keep doing pilots, it's my opinion, it's pointless, because you can keep doing pilots and still not make a difference. But I think somewhere there has to be a leap of faith that we say, okay, let's do a whole district and see where it takes us, and that's where I think the combination of government, impact investing, and nonprofits like us can make a difference. Having said that, thank you very much. I know we are 10 minutes over time. Thank you so much for your time. Pushpa, if there are any questions and you have to ask them, please go ahead.
No, there are no questions from the audience on this particular panel discussion. Thank you very much to all the panelists and to Ashok for leading this panel. Just to summarize this webinar, I will start from where Shaheen stopped. That was truth is hard, and there are alarming statistics, as seen in a video in the beginning of the webinar. But there is always hope for all of us to come together and solve this. There are different models of blended learning that's possible, and children can learn outside the classroom as well. And I think it's time for us to focus on what is important and what is urgent, that is education for our children. And investment community can fund innovations, but there should be an investment from the government, and the civil society should come together. Thank you very much for this panel discussions and the opening remarks from you, Shaheen. Thank you very much for staying with us all through this. I thank all the panelists for making your time for this webinar. In spite of your busy schedule, I know some of you had to squeeze in this, taking away your time from other important duties that you had. I thank all our partner NGOs who are present, our donor communities, and important, our teachers in the field, people from the education department. I would extend my thanks to all the audience and our team in the field who inspire us to work every day. This was the fourth webinar in a series that we had, and there was a very good participation from across the spectrum, from the ground as well. And all of our Akshara's content and the previous webinar are available in YouTube for you to watch later. And please watch, learn, and continue the good work. Thank you all. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.